Hello, my name is JPtheOrangeLantern, also known as just Jason, if you will. That's my first name, don't wear it out. And I am going to talk a little bit about Alien Earth, the 8-episode miniseries that just ended on Hulu, and where I watched it was FX. So I have notes here that I wrote down about it. But I'll try not to stray too much, like looking at the notes. But my big takeaway from Alien Earth is, first, for those of you who are unaware, it's not even the first time that name has been used. There are Alien Earth novels based in the Aliens universe. For me, what the biggest takeaway from Alien Earth was that it was trying to be a proof of concept in a lot of ways for a longer standing series. It was trying to take elements that we had seen in the previous. Sorry, I'm just trying to. That we'd seen in the previous Alien movies, and it made it. Or it was trying to incorporate them into a more like continuing narrative. This is where this is gonna be kind of interesting because for me, personally, Alien Earth is the definition of a mixed bag. There are some things that I really liked about it, a lot of things that I didn't really care for in it, a lot of things that I think can be done better if they were given a second season to work with, but I don't necessarily believe that Disney, who now owns 20th Century Fox, automatically should greenlight a second season of this show just because I think there's potential for certain things. Let me just get the first couple positives that I like out of the way. I like the alien designs, the xenomorph designs, and I also like that they added a couple of different other alien types that weren't like the traditional hard-shelled H.R. Geiger xenomorphs, because it adds some depth to the world and the lore, and it doesn't make the whole show that predictable then as to what you're going to get. The fly alien and then the plant alien that they had, which were never really given names. But then, of course, the eyeball alien was kind of the star of the show, which was called the Ocellus or Ocellus, I believe, or Ocellus. I'm probably butchering that. I know it's a very Latin-sounding name, but the eyeball alien was really the star of the show, and how he interacted with the xenomorph in many ways was very creepy and very intriguing for me personally, and it made me want to see more of him almost than the actual xenomorph itself, in my opinion. So the Alien Earth is set in 2021, or not 2021, 2120. That means that canonically in the timeline it's set 2 years before the original Alien film from 1979. I was very conflicted about this, and I was like, okay, maybe they can do it well, but I gotta tell you, after the show was over, I legitimately do not understand or see the reason as to why this had to be before the original Alien. In part because it just raises a whole bunch of questions as to were all these other corporations mentioned? Why were they not mentioned in the actual movie as like potential competitors? Like, you never hear Ash mention the Prodigy Corporation or anything like that, and what they're developing on Earth in the original movie. It fits a little bit better. Alien Covenant and Prometheus aren't actually apparently part of this universe, which is probably for the best, because Well, I didn't hate Covenant or Prometheus. Prometheus for me was just a long slog of a movie with uninteresting characters. At least Alien Covenant, while the characters were overall a little bit dumb on the dumb side, at least the body horror was interesting, and I was kind of invested to see how it all played out, even if it also ended on a relatively stupid cliffhanger, in my opinion. Noah Hawley is the creator and the showrunner of the series. He's got some credits that feature being a writer-director for Bones, Fargo, and Legion, as well as writing and directing the film Lucy in the Sky. I'm aware of Fargo and I'm aware of Bones. I'm not aware of his other works. One of the other core things that's kind of lying underneath in terms of like themes is clearly like humanity and its quote unquote future. It starts with there are three different types of like enhancements to try and give humanity immortality going forward. Cyborgs, which are basically humans with machine parts, and then there's the synths, which are the things that we've come to know and love in the Aliens universe. Your bishops, your Ashes, or David, if you're a fan of Alien Romulus. And then lastly, what's introduced in this series, which it's an interesting idea. It really is. I was actually interested to see where they would take this idea of hybrids, the idea of implanting human consciousness into a synthetic body. So basically, humans in the bodies of synths, like human consciousness in the bodies of synths. And the idea then that kind of runs parallel to this is the idea of these hybrids kind of coming to grips with their humanity and trying to see, are they more human or are they more machine? That age-old question. And as a result, I feel like, it's not really a question that's actually answered, and it's not really one that's handled all that well, in my opinion. Like, it kind of in part because the hybrids themselves, well, yes, spoiler alert, they are kids that, like, terminally ill kids that have their minds transferred into adult shells, and therefore, kids are they're gonna be petulant, they're gonna be impatient, they're gonna, do things that only would make sense to kids. And they don't necessarily make them that likable, as people, because, sometimes we get mad at kids a lot quicker than we do adults, it seems like, even though we're also quicker to forgive kids because they're just kids, kind of thing. And in my opinion, nothing is epitomized more by like the character growth or lack thereof growth than with the main character of Wendy. See, the Prodigy CEO, Boy Cavalier, which, my God, talk about your made-up sci-fi names. He is apparently obsessed with creating a generation of hybrids for the future of humanity. Why? Is it just because he wants to stroke his own ego? Is it because he wants to legitimately help humanity go into the future and not have to deal with, mortality or whatnot? It's not really made clear. But the point is that he's named all of these hybrids after Peter Pan and the Lost Boys. And Wendy is, his favorite. It's his first. It's the first synth. Wendy is also, in many ways, the main character, played by Sydney Chandler. And I've got to admit, I don't think that Sydney Chandler is a bad actress. I just think that a lot of the dialogue and a lot of the characterization for Wendy gives her nothing to work with. I think it makes her look, because the term that kept popping in my head every time I saw Wendy on screen and saw her do almost anything is Mary Sue. Just like this impenetrable plot character that, can't really take any hits or can't take any damage. She gets locked into a room in episode 2. Was it episode 2 or was it episode 3? One of the earliest episodes. She gets locked in a meat locker with a xenomorph. She has super strength, so she knows she has super strength. But other than that, she's still just a kid who's only been in this adult synth body for like a couple of weeks, maybe a couple months. It's not really clear on the timeline. Yet she's able to single-handedly overpower and defeat an adult xenomorph from the crash site, because the Earth part of Alien Earth refers to the fact that at the very beginning, there is a Weyland-Yutani spaceship that crashes into New Siam, which is a Prodigy-owned city on Earth, which that's kind of neat. We don't really get to see much of Earth aside from, like, you know, seeing what kind of megapolis, like skyscrapers, people can kind of live in. And basically, for the most part, you know, we also get introduced to Wendy's brother named Joe, and he basically... he's trying to serve in many ways as kind of like the moral compass for Wendy, to try and get, you know, like her, to keep her in touch with her humanity. But it clearly doesn't work. Like, they clearly aren't nearly as close as the show wants you to believe that they are. Or if they are, it's clear that they drifted so far apart that it's... that they're no longer as close as they were as brother and sister. The other major character that stood out for me was Morrow, the cyborg. He's probably the most interesting character in the show, aside from Kirsch, who is basically almost like the grandfather or the father figure to these synths, but he also happens to be the hybrids, but he also happens to be a scientist. Both of them basically are kind of two sides of the same coin. And how they operate and how they act. Kirsch is played by Timothy Olyphant, who gaming fans might actually remember him as playing Agent 47 in the first ever Hitman movie that they ever did. He's also had like multiple different roles, including shows like Deadwood and stuff like that. So if you're a fan, Timothy Olyphant is probably actually the most recognizable actor from like an actual like television film perspective, because a lot of these actors, I noticed they were like from Broadway, or they have just gotten their career started. That's not a bad thing. It's just, you know, and in many ways it kind of echoes the original Alien cast, the idea that a lot of the actors in that movie would go on to have long and fruitful careers, but you know, before Alien, nobody was probably calling up Sigourney Weaver day and night to try and, you know, like cast her in like mainstream roles or even in roles in general. So, you know, I get the idea. It's kind of like, you know, to make brand new stars with a now existing property. I can respect that. But I will say that other than that, most of the characters I just found really either dumb or unlikable. Boy Cavalier just comes across as a mustache-twirling villain, and by the end of it, I finally realized what he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be like an autistic super genius, because he has little to no empathy for the people that work under him. And he only cares for his own selfish desires and feelings, which, and he's kind of tunnel visioned. I just literally, look, I get it. There's going to be interpretations of, you know, people with autism or whatever in media. I'm not always going to agree with it, but it just kind of, it's almost kind of a little bit ham-fisted in how they try to like make it towards the end, like, see, he was a victim of domestic abuse back in the day, but his super genius, as a result of his autism, allowed him to craft a cyborg at 6, or a synthetic at 6 years old. And my phone, my BS detector went off and be like, hold the phone. How does a 6-year-old get the parts to build a synthetic, even in the future? A working synthetic, mind you. Not only that, but be smart enough to actually program it to kill somebody, because that's what he ends up doing unintentionally, is he ends up getting his synthetic, what it would become his father, to kill his real-life father, his alcoholic father, and then that's how he starts his life as the Prodigy CEO, basically. But like I said, a lot of the other characters, like their decisions, like some of their decisions I get, like especially with the hybrids, like they come across as kids making decisions in adult bodies. I get that. They get scared, they panic, they make false moves. But like I said, Wendy basically just kind of like decides out of the blue, like, you know, maybe the aliens are better than humanity. And I think the point the show is trying to make, but it fails at, is the idea that the aliens know what they are. They're predators at their most basic instinct, whereas humans will use Machiavellian schemes to undercut each other and betray and backstab each other, all while saying we love each other and care for each other as a species. Okay, that's fine, but it's not exactly accurate, and it still doesn't change the fact that it's stupid that Wendy even would remotely think that the aliens are somehow a better, you know, like better species than humanity because they can't communicate. And this was the other thing that drove me up the wall throughout the series with Wendy, and this is why I again call her Mary Sue. They keep giving Wendy powers out of nowhere, and just for the sake of, like, I don't know, like making the show interesting or what they think is interesting, or making her seem like a supreme badass, when in reality all it's like is, come on, how do you develop that? There are two main things that come to mind, and one of them is like the running like thing throughout the show is that she can communicate somehow vocally with the xenomorph, and she can somehow control it. And I just kind of like go, huh? How? Why? I mean, don't get me wrong, it makes for an interesting plot device, but at least Ripley in Alien Resurrection, as god-awful as Alien Resurrection was, at least she had the excuse of having hybrid xenomorph human DNA, so that the xenomorphs might have hesitated on her, like maybe they can smell part of them in her genes that would make them hesitate. Wendy is a goddamn cyborg who has literally no connection to the xenomorphs other than apparently, I don't know, some sort of Babel database that Cavalier put into her brain so that she could analyze and examine like languages. It just doesn't make any sense. And then the last one is the entire episode 8, and this was it just made me go, oh, come on, at least like 6 or 7 times. In the end, and this is, again, a spoiler, so I apologize, because it's still relatively new, but the hybrids, not just Wendy, but the hybrids on the whole, are able to get access to the entire Prodigy base, all the island security and the video feeds and everything. And they are able to shut it all down and manually control it while locked in a secure holding cell. I have several questions, but the first question that leapt to mind, and I'm sure it leaps to mind too when you hear this, is, especially since they're captives now by the Prodigy Corporation, is why would you give your hybrid cyborg synthetic or your hybrid synthetics access to your entire mainframe, and why wouldn't you take that away the moment that they get caught? And more importantly, how are they able to know that they would do this? If they're kids, they probably haven't been trained. I mean, the first time they even leave the island after they get their new bodies is to go check out the ship on Earth. How in the hell do they know they can interact and super hack everything? It drives me crazy because it's not mentioned even once, not even by Boy Cavalier or by Kirsch, and how, like, we should really be careful how much access we give these kids, because they have access, they have the ability to override all our security systems if they really want to. None of that's ever mentioned. It's clearly just a way, because otherwise the kids would have no way of winning otherwise. But again, that's just lazy writing in my opinion. The other thing that kind of upset me and the other thing that kind of made me wonder what the heck was the point of it. There's a lot of subplots that go nowhere, One of them involves the ginger-haired lost boy, prodigy, or lost girl, if you will, from the Prodigy Corporation called Nibs. She, in episode 4, upon returning from Earth, talks to the guidance counselor / scientist lady for Prodigy, and she admits somehow that she's somehow pregnant. And the doctor tries to, she tries to take this as well as she can, but the kid's clearly delusional. The kid knows nothing about it. It almost sounds, it's a random ass thing that it sounds like it's something that's said because it's something that would get the audience's jaw to drop on the floor. And by the end of it all, like, they have to restrain her, and then they end up mind wiping her. And then, as if that wasn't bad enough, they don't tell any of the other kids what they're doing or what happened. They don't even bother to show the video footage of why Nibs, or of Nibs acting out, and therefore, this was kind of to make sure that it was a self-preservation thing, not to mention wiping somebody's memories and consciousness alone is just something that's always morally dubious. But even then, it's not, it takes Wendy, explaining to her, about the thing with Earth and all that stuff. It gets Nibs' memories back, and guess what? She's just as pissed as she was when she was, and unhinged as she was when she was talking to the doctor about her fake pregnancy or whatever her pregnancy was. Again, it's one of those things where it's like if the characters put any degree of thought and effort into it, supposedly these scientists are really super smart, and yet they still make very dumb mistakes. It's kind of like this now, of course, the idea of like the aliens studying the aliens, I get that. That's kind of like just kind of par for the course for the Alien brand. And you could argue that in many ways, like the characters themselves, weren't dumb, except for the cruise ship in episode 5. See, we actually get to see the ship, and let me see here now what the ship's name was, or the name of the ship here. The Maginot. So the Maginot is Weyland-Yutani's ship that crashes on Earth. We actually get to see on episode 5 the events that lead up to what happens to the crash on Earth. So apparently somebody sabotaged it and had a deal with Prodigy, which really just felt, it could have been any of the major corporations. It just felt like it was Prodigy, just so that we could kind of tie everything back to Boy Cavalier and kind of like show that yes, he's always had an interest in these aliens. It wasn't just, hey, I found this ship with all the alien specimens, I'm just going to go do research on them. No, it's more like he knew about them ahead of time and he didn't think he would get them, but now he does. And we basically get to watch throughout episode 5. It's probably the best episode of the series because it's the most like the original Alien film. Except if the crew of Alien was like 10 times dumber and 10 times less indecisive. Like the containment protocols for the alien specimens are just laughably bad. It really just, it's no surprise that they get out the way that they do. I will say that it's also where some of the greater body horror kind of comes into play. Like the eyeball alien inhabiting like a dead cat, and then they had like some tick aliens in the earlier episodes. That was kind of cool, and that was kind of crazy. But the other major thing that they end up doing, and this is kind of as, stuff starts to fall apart at Prodigy, is that the cyborg gets in touch with Slightly, which is one of the lost boys who happens to apparently still have connection to his family other than Wendy and Joe, which is also a bit of a point of a contention between the other hybrids, is that why does she get to have her brother and we don't get to have any of our family here with us? It's kind of sort of like brought up in passing like 2 or 3 times, and then it's pretty much immediately dropped because Joe Hermit himself, that's his last name, pretty much just becomes kind of like this passenger that doesn't really do anything. Again, he's trying to function as the moral compass for Wendy, or Marcy, which is her real name, her birth name. But he fails so much at it. Like, she's clearly like, She clearly thinks she knows better with all of this technology and everything. But anyways, the cyborg says, hey, I want to get my hands on a brand new specimen of alien, or I want to get for Weyland-Yutani, because that's basically, we actually get to meet the head of Weyland-Yutani, and she wants all of her specimens back. They eventually agree to a deal with Prodigy, but Morrow, the cyborg, also wants a brand new alien for them to study. So he says, hey, get a facehugger on some random dolt, some random human, and then bring them to me, and then we'll take care of it. He doesn't tell him what the facehugger does. He doesn't tell him what the chest burster or anything with the alien, even though the kid should have been able to put 2 and 2 together with this giant alien that, hey, if this egg doesn't actually open unless something like some sort of human is present nearby, it can't be anything good, can it? But of course he doesn't get it. And he's blackmailed, admittedly, by, his mother. The cyborg, meets up with his mother and, threatens, to hurt his mother if he doesn't go along with the plan. So he's blackmailed, admittedly. He originally tries to go to Marcy or to Marcy's brother and get him face hugged, but he eventually backs out or chickens out. And then he gets one of the only people willing to help the hybrids every step of the way, looking out for their well-being. He turns off their trackers so the company can't track them when they try to make their escape. He ends up getting pulled in because he sees what happens to Isaac. One of the fly alien eventually dissolves the face of Isaac after the eyeball alien, which has been implanted in a sheep, ends up causing trouble and chaos and locking him in a containment cell. So he brings him in. He brings in Arthur is his name. He brings in Arthur, the head scientist, and one of the whose wife is the psychologist lady, and another scientist. He brings him in, Slightly does, to the chamber, and Arthur is he's trying to help, he's trying to do things, and Slightly, you can tell he's actually conflicted about this for a while. But then eventually he just lets the alien the facehugger do its thing. He pulls himself and Arthur with the facehugger attached through a vent so that they can escape out a vent before the xenomorph, the adult xenomorph, because there is an adult xenomorph that they captured somehow in there, can get them. And he somehow drags him, without anybody noticing, into his room. His bedroom, Slightly does. And he ends up getting Smee, another one of the Lost Boys, and one of his probably his closest friend amongst the Lost Boys, to cover up and say, hey, we got to get Arthur off the island here. Things are going to crap. But he doesn't tell anything about, the blackmail or the hostage, nothing. So that's kind of where Slightly loses a lot of points, because it's maybe Smeed won't help him if he tells him all this horrible stuff, that about what about how he's been in contact with Yutani and whatnot. But at least try. You have to at least try to convince us that he knows at least something other than this is probably not going to end well, and deliberately hiding it from him. And then also deliberately hiding it from Arthur, too. Once Arthur, the facehugger, wakes up, and just before the chest burster, he tries ever so hard to basically, say, it wasn't my fault, it wasn't my fault. And I get it. I get deep down that it's supposed to be because they're kids in adult bodies, so their right from wrong sense is very skewed, and they don't necessarily always take accountability for their screw-ups in the best way. But it basically makes me feel bad for Arthur, who's this moral compass and the one person at Prodigy who is morally good, not unambiguously in any way. He's got no hidden agenda. His goal is simply to help these kids. He wants the program to be successful because he believes, perhaps foolishly and perhaps just the purity of it, to be helpful for humanity. But even then, he dies, and then somehow, some way, Kirsch actually ends up capturing the baby xenomorph chest burster on the island. And then the Cyborg and the Weyland-Yutani forces, they don't... one of the things that kind of bugged me was in the commercials, it felt like we were going to get a showdown between Weyland-Yutani and like the Prodigy Security Corps forces. And I love the fact that they also had pulse rifles, nice little nod to Aliens there, including having the sound effects for them. But no, they don't really face off against each other in like a shooting battle, and then like the alien gets involved. It's more like the alien ends up the adult alien, once it escapes, it ends up picking off like dozens and dozens of Prodigy security forces in like the jungle on the island, and then after that, it pretty much just, like the Weyland-Yutani guys be like, well, I didn't see it. And so it's kind of weird. Let me see here. What else was I going to say? The other thing, yeah, there is a cliffhanger ending. I'm not going to spoil what it is, but I will say what the director said. He said that it's kind of about the choice of being human, a theme throughout the show. Wendy will often turn her back on her alien friend doing his rampage, proving that she's not really willing to come to grips with the consequences of her actions of like sicking the alien on, people. And she also acts very indignant again, like when they're getting ready to like board a boat at the end of episode 7 to try and escape, Marcy, her brother, and Nibs. They end up getting confronted by a couple of Joe Hermit, Marcy's brother, his friends, who were Prodigy security officers on Earth that got brought in to have their injuries tended to after they dealt with a crash on Earth, and they got better cushy gigs, but they end up basically getting slaughtered in the lab later on in episode 8, but. Like, when they confront Joe, it's like you can tell, he's hesitant because he knows these people. These are his friends. And, to Wendy and to Nibs, they don't mean jack shit. So Nibs literally pulls the jaw off of one of the security officers of Prodigy, murdering him in front of Wendy and Marcy's eye, or Wendy and Joe's eyes. And then when the security forces basically, get ready to fire upon her, Joe, he grabs an electronic, like a stun gun, like it's almost like a rifle, but it's a stun gun. And when he fires it at Nibs to knock her into the water and basically stop her from killing anybody else, Wendy has the nerve to ask, "What did you do?" Like he betrayed her trust. Like, doing something to stop somebody who murdered somebody who's clearly mentally unstable like Nibs was not, the wrong thing to do, like to prevent further bloodshed. It just comes across as, again, like these characters, if they get a second season, Wendy's going to have a lot of growing up to do, and definitely she's going to have to become a little bit more likable. There was another character amongst the Lost Boys who, let me see here, my notes, named Curly, whose real name was Jane. She seemingly wants to get with Boy Cavalier, if she doesn't have like a hero worship thing for him, or if she doesn't have like a romantic thing for him, which she kind of seems to have, it almost feels like she wants romantically for him to notice her. Jane does have the desire to be the favorite of Boy Cavalier, which basically means that she's the ass kisser character. Like, whenever you get like a group of kids in like these, like these series where you have like, certain archetypes, you have certain, like characteristics that kind of carry over. Like, one's the goody two-shoes that follows the book by the rules and always wants constant approval and attention from authority, or tries to do things the right way. That's Jane in this particular series. But again, it just comes across as unlikable. And like I said, these characters are so underdeveloped. The other things that I liked about it, I liked that they closed each episode of the show, and they also had some tracks within the show. featuring 90s music in particular, or bands from like stuff from the 90s, like stuff from Black Sabbath, Tool, Metallica, Jane's Addiction, The Smashing Pumpkins, Pearl Jam, Godsmack. Very well done music by choices by Jeff Russo, the music director of the show, especially since each episode of the show ended with one of those tracks to kind of like, help you, or to kind of make the credits a little more interesting and enjoyable. But like I said, my biggest problems and takeaways with Alien Earth is the cast of characters. The acting is not bad. The writing is but it's not awful. I will say, though, that if it wasn't for the new aliens, and if it wasn't for several select scenes where we actually have like brutal slaughter by the xenomorph, like the second episode in the apartment complex comes to mind. There's this big grand soiree where Hermit's trying to like knock on the door to like get everybody out of there, and they ignore him, and the xenomorph just ends up going in there and like wrecking shop like something fierce. That's a cool scene. And then like a lot of the other creepy scenes with like the aliens, when the aliens are actually doing stuff, it's interesting. And like I said, the Ocellus, the eyeball alien, is honestly more interesting than anything involving the xenomorph, because it's got a beef seemingly with the xenomorph that we don't actually know about. It just seems to hate the xenomorph with a passion to the point where they fight each other on a couple of occasions, and we're left kind of wanting more, because at the end of the show, this is a spoiler, the Ocellus manages to escape from the facility after failing to implant itself in Joe, because Joe's an idiot and he somehow believed that Boy Cavalier was going to let him take Marcy away, because and all you had to do was come up to his office, even after everything that Boy Cavalier said to him in the show previously about how I own you, I own them, I'm never going to let you leave, you're never going to be a family, blah, blah, blah. But I digress. So the Ocellus manages to get out of the facility and manages to find its way to the beach where Arthur's body is, and just like the cat from the Maginot, the Ocellus implants its eyeball into the dead Arthur, meaning that we might have something interesting. And that was another thing that kind of bugged me. I love how nobody, or at no point in time, did Arthur's wife, the other scientist lady, ask, where was Arthur? What happened to Arthur? Do you know where he is? Like, there was a couple scenes where it was shown like they not only loved their jobs, but they loved each other. But by the end of it, I guess it was just because of the tension of the situation. Like, everything just kind of fell apart, and so she forgot about him, I guess. I don't know. But that's my ramblings and thoughts on Alien Earth. I didn't touch on everything because I do think that if you're a fan of science fiction, if you're a fan of the Alien franchise, you do probably want to at least watch a couple episodes of it. The best episode is easily episode 5. I'm kind of torn between what was the worst episode or the episode that I liked the least. I want to say episode 4, because absolutely nothing really happens from like an action perspective. It's just like this big like come down moment on top of like an episode where we were already kind of seeing them like establish the experiments on the island in episode 3. And other than the absolute like complete dumbness of Nibs and like the whole like her thinking somehow that she was pregnant, there's really nothing about the episode, and like her going psychotic when the doctor would have like the gall to maybe even remotely challenge her, and her stuffed animal. That was another thing too. Like she was such a mentally, she was such a child that she believed like a stuffed animal was almost like a person. And look, I get that. That's probably going to happen when you're a kid and you get thrust into an adult body, but I mean, at some point you have to kind of like, curtail that a little bit, or at least try to, if you want them to be taken seriously as a character. Or episode 8, where, like I said, it just feels like, oh my god, our heroes, quote unquote, the hybrids, are at their lowest point, and then they just Deus Ex Machina, Mary Sue, bullshit, whatever you want to call it, their way out of a certain doomed situation, and they manage to capture the adults, and they hold them hostage, and the aliens are somehow on their sides as the Yutani company as Weyland-Yutani is about to come and collect the specimens. It just doesn't, I don't know, it was very kind of like, it was frustrating because it felt like they were writing stuff in to make things work, and it would have helped with a little bit of foreshadowing. Not saying it has to be entirely explained, but there's a lot of elements to like the hybrid's abilities and stuff like that that are kind of hand-woven away, and that made me lose a lot of interest in this series by the end, because the hybrids are clearly the main focal point aside from the actual aliens. And yet, it feels like the hybrids themselves are not characters that I want to care about. They're not interesting people. They don't develop as people. And they're still stuck in that child mindset with no real hints of adulthood. If Disney greenlights this for a second season, I hope that it's not going to take like 4 or 5 episodes for them to actually start developing these kids into adults, that they are actually forced to come to grips within like the first episode or 2 of their consequences, of their decisions, of their actions. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I don't usually do these rambling vlogs, but I watched it from beginning to end. I had some stuff I wanted to say about it. I don't know if it's all coherent, but yeah, if you if you're a big fan of the Aliens franchise, definitely check this one out. And for at least a couple episodes, I was very mixed with this. I would say that if I was giving it like a star rating, like an ARS, arbitrary rating system rating, I would probably say it's close to 2 to 2.5 stars out of 5. It's definitely not great, but it's definitely not bad. The thing is that I was actually left pining though for Alien Resurrection after this, because Alien Resurrection, like I said, it felt like it did a lot of this stuff with the hybrids, the human hybrids, a little more interesting, but instead of, like synthetics, it was humans and aliens. That to me had more potential. That to me was more interesting. And it kind of made me pine for the cheesiness that was Alien Resurrection. It's not going to encompass or it's not going to be as good as the original Alien. But that's the other thing too. And I feel like I mentioned this in passing, but the real killer for me personally, as to why I think this is not as great a show as it could be, is its insistence on being tied just before the original Alien movie. That to me leaves me with too many questions, like, why aren't the cyborg technology, why aren't the hybrids a thing then in Aliens when we go further down the timeline? Why is Weyland-Yutani then still using basic-ass synthetics? Where are the other corporations? Did Weyland-Yutani actually run them off, or was Weyland-Yutani just the one that we'd gotten to know and hate kind of thing? It just doesn't make sense. That's just kind of things that I think about sometimes with these things over much. But I digress. This is Jason, aka JP the Orange Lantern, signing off. I hope you enjoyed this. Hopefully this rambling is not boring. And I'll see you guys around next time with other videos, gameplay, wrestling interviews, maybe coming soon again. Hint, hint, hint. Unboxings and adventures with my hedgehog. All right, thanks. Peace out.